Hi, Dennis. It's a pleasure to have an interview with you about everything that Lumia does because you are exploring quite extraordinary field. And tell us a little bit about yourself and also a little bit about Lumia's vision.
Sure. Thanks for having me. One Deniz to another. So I'm Deniz, blockchain architect over at Lumia, one of the co-founders. Lumia is building a layer two universe or ecosystem of asset owners who are willing to bring their assets on chain to make it accessible and tradable 24/7, and link that asset or the assets that are tokenized with retail from Web3 and Web2 space.
You have a lot of examples on your website of all the different various assets where you're working with, and also institutions. We'll get to institutions specifically about how you manage, because this is a very complex thing for everybody in Web3, I think, to manage institutions well in terms of compliance, security, and all of these things. We'll get to that, but first, what type of assets normally get tokenized? What are the real world asset examples? And for some of the business oriented people, why should they look out about Lumia and follow and maybe, well, engage with you?
Yeah, sure. So the type of assets are effectively anything apart from securities. So we try to sort of stay clear of securities like stocks, etc., because of regulatory issues and so the gray area that they live in. But apart from that, we're open to precious metals, gemstones, commodities, real estate, both commercial and residential. And we try to tokenize them to be accessible worldwide. So that's what we focus on. Of course, there are hurdles to it. You know, this business is beyond your typical crypto business. You know, you start catering to people outside that space that we have, outside the crypto native people. You start speaking to institutions who are interested about tokenization but don't necessarily know anything beyond the word. So we try to find a way to onboard them by simplifying the processes, adding abstraction layers, taking care of as much of the heavy lifting as possible, like the legal work, where it's just a matter of for them to review things, sign the contracts before things are tokenized, and then hopefully get them on chain to be DeFi integrated so that these usually illiquid and not yield-bearing products become liquid and yield-bearing products on chain.
Mhm. And every chain or every project, even, they normally have exciting clients within the network when something appears or something gets tokenized. You say like, "Oh, we went through this milestone and we got this and this and that." Like, I know you have been through a lot, but can you highlight some of the noteworthy cases in, I would say, Lumia's portfolio?
So the first tokenization case we had was for a property development company in Istanbul. They have signed a contract with us to tokenize and put 220 million worth of entire compound of residential buildings on chain. So the compound itself has, I think, about 500 or 600 apartments inside it, and then within that compound there are two actual physical towers, like skyscrapers, and those towers will be actually called Lumia Towers. So it's the first crypto project or crypto skyscrapers in the world.
Mhm.
And we have agreed and signed the contracts, but now it's a matter of timing in terms of legal. So we're getting the legal sorted out to make sure everything is compliant. And if there are any sort of legal issues that may arise in the future, which we hope, of course, it won't, but if it does, then there will be enough legal protection for both the investors and the asset owner to make sure everything goes smoothly as possible. We are speaking to several other partners, asset owners. Unfortunately, we can't name them because of NDAs, but this ranges from like gold companies to lithium mines to coal mines and diamond mines, etc. So we have a wide range of companies and asset owners that we're speaking to, as well as some sovereign states that want to do things on chain and bring their infrastructure up to date with the latest decentralized architecture.
We start soft with this interview, and of course, you being the blockchain architect and the co-founder of Lumia, then of course you will have a deep dive into all of the tech of the solution later on as well. But I would like to continue a bit on the softer side too, and maybe take some of the examples for again some business-oriented folks. Skyscrapers got tokenized. What does it enable them to do? What's the business value of that?
Sure. So in general, tokenization, one of the biggest advantages of tokenization is that you are able to capture liquidity from across the globe. If that property development company did not tokenize and decide to go down the traditional route that they have, they would be subject to the boundaries of the Turkish nation and the liquidity that's within that nation, right? So we are basically telling them, look, you could do the same thing and sell it, but either sell the ownership, which would allow them to actually sell the apartment to one or many people because it's fractionalized, or you could also tokenize the rental yield, the projected rental yield. So the ownership stays within the certain legal entity, but the yield is tokenized and distributed out. And this way, they're able to capture all this liquidity from across the Web3 space and across the world as well, as we start adding abstraction layers to bring in Web2 people across the world, not just Web3. So that was the biggest selling point. And of course, once we start building DEXs on top of Lumia, once we start building on-chain perps, once we start getting an ecosystem of applications coming on-chain, then these tokens can be used even further. So if I was to, for example, buy a fraction of an ownership on that compound, and it has a trading avenue such as a DEX where I can buy and sell it immediately, that now has volume, that now has liquidity. So now I can take that as a collateral and use it in a DeFi protocol. Even though the underlying asset might be going up in price, I don't have to be locked in. I can go to DeFi and borrow against it and then use that liquidity to fund my next venture,
Mm,
and
mm,
sort of leverage the liquidity continuously so that uh, liquidity is never idle. It never just sits in your wallet. That's the whole point, and that's what we pitch to our potential clients, institutions, and asset owners, and they immediately see the positives. It gives them access to immediate liquidity, while it gives the investor access to wide range of opportunities while leveraging their liquidity on chain.
okay, yeah, that makes total sense. And I have a question that I'm not sure if you do have answers to or not, but I was wondering. I heard about one person who told us that, oh, I'm tokenizing myself or my children. I was wondering how does that work? Do you have any
Well,
clue? What's that about?
I mean, I've read a few posts of this, but I think it's a bit dystopian and far-fetched. So with some of the influencers, for example, well, I guess it could make sense for them because they live on attention, and that's what they do. But for example, if you are an influencer and you tokenize yourself, you effectively put a value on each token of yourself, depending on whatever metrics you want to rely on with
Mm,
your valuation. And let's say you start monetizing your post on X, you start monetizing your post on TikTok. That's a revenue to you. But because you've tokenized yourself, it's a revenue to all those who have bought into your token. That could be like one way of tokenizing yourself. But then again, it opens the doors for a lot of legal disputes. How do you verify the earnings? How do you sort of make sure that everybody sticks to the agreement? When obviously you're referring to individual, it's not like a property, you don't take ownership of the individual. It's a person. So it's a bit more tricky. And I think it's one of those experiments as
mm.
opposed to like a real product or real business.
Yeah. Okay, understood. That was my thinking too. But got it. Listen, when it comes to commodities, for instance, who would be, in terms of commodities, who would be interested? What kind of clientele, what kind of audience would be interested in using Lumia services to tokenize their commodities? And what kind of
So
commodities, maybe some of them make a little bit more sense to tokenize than others.
yeah, I mean, the first commodity that comes to mind would be like gold, silver, right? So, but they are already on chain, to a certain extent. We have Tether's gold token, we have Paxos Gold, etc. The problem with these tokens is that they don't have much utility in DeFi. So When you buy it, you're effectively just buying a mirrored version of the gold market on chain. And the only way to make a return is for the price to go up. Then you sell it back to Tether or Paxos, etc. Now, if we take the same approach, but then we start building a DeFi market around these assets, then it becomes interesting. For example, I can buy gold and create a liquidity pair on one of the upcoming dexes on Lumia, where it's gold slash, I don't know, let's say USDT. It's
Mhm.
an open dex AMM pool. And I could be an LP in that pool by dropping my gold tokens and USDT. Now I'm generating yield of that gold token while I
Mhm.
still have the ownership of it. So these are the type of assets and commodities that we're looking into. But you could also use a different model for example, future commodities that have not been mined yet. So this is one of the things that we focus on, which we call effectively a bonding mechanism, which is just basically a bond. Let's say we have a partner, asset owner, who has a piece of land in Congo, Africa, right? We know Congo has a lot of rich minerals on the ground. These individuals who have owned these assets, these pieces of land, they usually take scientific reports from scans to say this is what's underneath the land, and it's pretty accurate, 99% accurate, these
Mhm.
scans. So we have a client that says he has tons of lithium underneath the ground, but it needs to be mined, it needs to be processed, sold, and so on. What they need in a typical situation is they need capital upfront. So let's say they need 10 million to mine it, process it, and sell it, and they need about 12 to 18 months. They could create a bonding mechanism on Lumia where it says this is the tokenized asset, this is the report, this is the whole transparency and bunch of legal documents that says we own this land has this much lithium, and this is how long it's going to take to process the mine, and this is the projected yield. Now he could collect that initial 10 million from investors, both Web3 and Web2 investors through Lumia's offerings, and take that money and start actually doing the whole mining, processing, and selling.
Mhm.
And then at the time, in 12 months or 18 months, whatever the bond maturity date is, he will repay the 10 million
Mhm.
that he got initially, plus whatever he was promised as an APY. And now you have a risk, well, not risk free. Every investment is risk, has some level of risk, but low risk and guaranteed returns from a company that has actual commodities. So this is the kind of things that we're getting attached to a lot because there is a lot of markets out there around the world that need capital upfront. They have good projected yields, and they want to capitalize on this. So we found a good in between, and we call it the initial mine offerings, for example, that we're going to set up. And these mine offerings could be from gold to diamond to gemstones. So anything that has monetary value once it's processed and mined.
All right, all right. And I'm thinking about a question for a little bit of a wider audience. You mentioned this in the beginning that gold tokens, they're really like just, they're tokens. They're not as much of a physical gold itself. Like, but there is a thinking that maybe it's best to invest in physical gold. But if this physical gold is tokenized, could people be should they still be concerned about having their gold at home, a sofa, under a pillow, or wherever people
Yeah.
keep the gold, or should they be safe? And if they could be safe, what are the safe mechanisms there?
So again, it's more of a outlook on how you view your asset and how you view custodian. So, for example, if you are part of the older generation before us, for example, I'm pretty sure you'll be inclined to have the gold underneath your mattress.
Mm,
That's just how they think. That's just how they view things. But the reality is having gold under your mattress has its risks, like security risks. It has a lot more risks than having your gold on token, mirrored as a token. Obviously, when I have a decent amount of gold in my house, if I was to have it, then I have to have adequate security. I would have to make sure things are just sort of the home is never left alone, kind of thing. But if I have it on my wallet, especially the account abstraction wallets that we have, where you don't even have to think about seed phrases, then I could effectively take it everywhere I want. And then now we speak about including it in the DeFi ecosystem. So the gold that sits in my underneath my mattress is not going to generate a yield. The only
mm,
yield that it's going to generate is price going up. Um, But the gold that I have in tokenized format, I could put it into DeFi and put it to work, and then the price goes up, but I still earn an extra APY from it, which is, of course, it's win-win if you want to make some decent returns. But it's all about the mentality shift. I think we're at a stage where today it's all about asset-backed tokenized asset-backed tokens. Whereas I think in 10 years it will be token-backed assets. It will flip. The
Mm,
scenario is going to flip. And blockchain-based RWAs is going to become the source of truth eventually. And
mm,
the real world will start reflecting the blockchain world as opposed to blockchain world reflecting the real world.
mm,
Just because where the world is heading. It's undeniable that AI is coming. It's going to overtake a lot of things. It's going
mm,
to control our finances, give us the best yield, control many mundane tasks that we do not want to do. And the logical way to plug AI into this financial world is through transparent distributed ledgers like blockchains.
mm.
So I see it as a natural convergence, and whether you fight it today or you fight it tomorrow, whether you want the physical gold in your mattress or not, it's a decision that you have to make. But at the end of the day, we all invest to make money, and we all invest to make a return on something. And the best way to make a return at the moment and for the next 10 years is going to have to be a digital format based investment.
It's nice though to have physical gold at home because you feel like a little bit like a secret agent or a spy
Yeah.
against everybody you see, you know. You
Yeah,
have to be
exactly.
very
I mean, I
secretive.
always advocate for some level of physical investment,
Yeah,
but never to an extent where it's going to start getting you paranoid and thinking about the security issues.
true. Listen, let's dive a little bit into tech, and then we will go back onto more of a business-oriented question, especially compliance and requirements of all the different regulatory organizations. Um, AggLayer, you're one of the flagship chains in the Aglar, I would say. How does the Aglar integration works for you, and what value does it bring for you, and why maybe should other chains think about joining that too? And also, of course, how other chains benefit from having Lumia within the Aglayer.
So Aglar in general is a great piece of software. When non-techies ask me what Aglar is, I always kind of struggle because it's not a bridge, but it's like a bridge.
Mm,
So it's very hard to explain it to non-tech. But the fact that you can prove state of one chain to another chain without any trust in between through Aglaer, it adds great flexibility in terms of interoperability and in terms of reducing liquidity fragmentation across the space. So if I have a massive liquidity pool on Lumia for, let's say, gold slash Lumia token, I can use that liquidity on another chain that's connected to Polygon AggLayer without having to think about the complications and how to interact with that chain, which is great. Because then, you know, one of the things that we want to do is we want all those who are playing in the RWA space to win and to tokenize as many assets as possible. Once you start creating these tokenized assets, we want those tokens to be flowing in and out of chains. And one of those ways is obviously Polygon AggLayer. So if you are tokenizing assets and if you are not connected to Polygon AggLayer, then you're effectively shooting yourself in the foot, so to speak, because you have to build some sort of interoperability. Otherwise, your siloed garden is of no use. How much can you actually do by yourself without interacting with the bigger Web3 ecosystem? So to that extent, Polygon Aglayer is a lifesaver for us. And anyone who's connected to Polygon Aglayer can actually not only send assets to our chain, Lumia, but they can even call contracts on our chain. So remote contract calls, procedure calls, etc. That can be handled. And this way, you open up the doors to the cross-chain applications, cross-chain DeFi, cross-pollination in general, which is really important for growth of the entire space in general.
mm, okay, okay, understood. And then let's go back to the business question still and talk about a little bit regulatory compliance and regulatory approach, because the things that you work with require, and as you say, some of the clients are still under NDA and they're still going on the process of this signing of different contracts, going through different verifications and such. This is a very tricky question. How do you manage to navigate across it? And also, these developments, or these rather explorations that you do, they will help for institutional adoption in future. And how do you see that?
Yeah. So legal jurisdictions and legal licenses is a key to any RWA project, right? You can't just say, I'm going to tokenize this and sell it to the public. That's just not going to work. They're going to come down on you heavy once they realize, or once you get to a certain level of growth and size, people will start looking into this. So it's best to set the track record clear and get the necessary the licenses from day one before you start sprinting and start scaling up. And that's the current stage that we're in. We're in process of acquiring few licenses from a couple of jurisdictions where we see a great demand for both tokenization and distribution of those tokenized assets. So I think you have to have these in place to realistically even have a genuine meeting with an asset owner, especially institutions. They would ask you immediately in meetings, the first meeting, that what kind of licenses do you have? Do you have the actual jurisdiction backend to do this? And if you say, well, yeah, through offshore or through some sort of like a vague legal
Mm.
setup, you're not going to be able to onboard the likes of BlackRock and Franklin Templeton and all these guys. They want things to check out, right? They want trust and they want reliability on their partners. So if you want to expand and grow, you have to have these in place. And it's not an easy feat to achieve, but it's a necessary step to take so that you can grow beyond the Web3 space and start really onboarding Web2 institutions and Web2 users at scale.
Mm. All right. All right. And talking about scalability, you do have hundreds of millions of assets in tokenized. That requires certain capabilities of a tech in the solution that you put through throughput, reliability, all that. How do you manage that?
So we push ZK boundaries with Gateway together as much as possible. So we started with the initial vanilla version of Polygon CDK ZK VM stack, which was at the time it wasn't much scalable. It was giving us some trouble. There were multiple components with it. We even found a bug where there will be like a mutual lock on the code and it just won't process any more transactions. But since the upgrade to Aragon, things have become a lot more smoother. So Aragon stack allows us to push up to 400 TPS at peak times, but there is a clear roadmap to all the way to 200 megagas per second, and then eventually and potentially to 1 gigagas per second using the Aragon stack. So we tried to push the boundaries with ZK EVM, and now we see things like succinct Hypercube SP1 development, where they were able to verify the entire Ethereum block within 12 seconds. Of course, the first version is quite expensive to set up in terms of hardware. You need about 300K with, I think it was like 40 graphics cards. But eventually things will start coming down and mature. And once that happens, ZK in general, I think is going to start eating up the world because ZK is crucial. It's not just ZK EVMs I'm talking about, it's ZKPs in general. It's a good way to prove data or show data that can be easily verifiable by anyone. And there is literally zero trust. It's all maths, right? So once the maths checks out, it checks out. And that's why we're so optimistic and keen on pushing ZK EVM, even though we had some criticism about choosing VKVM as opposed to OP Stack. I mean, OP Stack is great, and I don't want to kind of say anything bad about them, but our belief is that ZK is going to be the future, especially with what's happening in the sort of T environment, ZK environment, and then the whole AI convergence. It just makes sense. So we push the boundaries as much as possible. We push TPS as much as possible. We are at the moment testing with Gateway again the shared ZK prover network, which allows us to offload the ZK proven generation mechanism. We are going to start pushing for the decentralized sequences. We are already nearly done with the DA layer integration with Avail. So again, these are all about increasing the bandwidth and the TPS and the scaling capabilities of Lumia itself, and then maybe even Lumia L3s, which we are looking into at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, some of our clients already reached 300 megagas, and we are indeed doing research on 1 gigagas. And hopefully, this is going to be not too far ahead in the future. And the cost of infrastructure is dropping down with all of the development. So yeah, but like totally agree with you. This is something that we're very excited to have you on board, because this is a perfect project to push forward. And we really strongly believe that Lumia will be one of the forefront runners in tokenization of all the
Yeah, I
assets
hope
around
so.
there.
We'll win together.
Yes. But since you did mention about the ZK specifically, and about the technology that you use, can you walk us through a little bit of your architecture on a high level, maybe? How does the tokenization work in terms of what are the design principles behind your architecture?
Yeah. So the main thing for tokenization flow that we have put together on Lumia is, first, it's trust, and second is transparency, right? So because obviously these assets are attached to real world physical items, we had to have a way of tracing and kind of linking the two things up. So what we've done and what we developed is something called Lumia Hub, which is a tokenization flow that we have. You effectively go through a step-by-step flow. I think it's about 5 steps now, maybe six. We are adding a few more things. So you start with the basics, which is KYB, etc. And then we go into things like legal documents. These get sent out to compliance officers that we work with in the background. They get to check and approve everything. And then one of the requirements that we have is that every asset must have proof of reserve in some format. So if it's a gold token, then there must be some sort of a vote or custody of that token. So we have to have a proof of reserve Oracle feed attached to that company, the custody company, to make sure the gold's always there. Then we have custom oracles that you can set up to push off-chain prices to on-chain assets so that it follows the off-chain valuation, and there is little discrepancy between on-chain price and an off-chain pricing of a given asset. Um, and we try to, in general, think of ways to closely link the off-chain real asset and on-chain mirrored asset. And that's the kind of philosophy that we are following through, where once you review a token that gets tokenized on Lumia, you should, with just one click, have the entire breakdown of what that token is, what is it backed by, where is the actual asset, and then trace it all the way and every day by just clicking through this visual dashboard. And we believe that kind of transparency is key to getting people to actually invest in these assets. Otherwise, it just looks like a token that's minted out of thin air. So trust is key for us, and that's how we architected the whole hub and the follow through, which is post tokenization side of things. So yeah, that's the kind of philosophy we follow.
I want to go back a little bit to business questions and ask about, like, hey, how do I start tokenizing my assets? I have a couple of skyscrapers or a full mattress of gold. Like, what do I do? Where do I begin? But actually, before we go into this, you mentioned the tokenization hub. You mentioned the dashboard. You also mentioned in the previous answer layer 3s that you're working with. Let's talk a little bit about Lumia, where it is now and where it's heading, and what's the future in upcoming, like 6 to 12 to maybe 18 months, because the project is really exciting. And then we'll go back and talk a little bit more about the business side of things.
Sure. So Lumia today has its mainnet and testnet up and running. We are currently onboarding, I think, close to 10 dApps within the next 4 weeks to go live. We already have some interoperability. Obviously, Polygon Aglar integrated. We have Hyperlane, and then we have the native bridge between Ethereum itself. So we have some interoperability. We have a bunch of oracles. We have a bunch of indexes. So it's effectively ready for development from a developer's perspective. Now, we are trying to push the boundaries on the tech itself, again, with Gateway. So our next stage is that we have our new testnet, which is called B, up and running, which is using the shared ZK prover currently. And we're trying to push load testing onto it to see how it behaves, see how well it does, etc. And then hopefully we'll start moving things onto mainnet for ZK provers. And then we have Avail DA, Eval DA integration is obviously DA layer integration, but we're thinking of a dual post DA layer integration. So we'll post the DA into Avail, but we'll also post it into Ethereum because we want to be we want to be aligned with Ethereum, but we're not just kind of sticking to roll up category only. We want to be kind of in between roll up and Validium. So that's why we're posting to two places. And because Ethereum's obviously blobs are 30-day temporary blobs, they get flushed anyway, but Avail keeps it forever. So it gives us that redundancy and disaster recovery abilities, additional benefits that come with it. And we pay our rent to Ethereum, which is what Ethereum Foundation wants, right? They want Ethereum traction. So that's where we kind of sit today. Now, in the 6 to 12 months after that, we start really onboard token asset owners and maybe even sovereign level, state level in players to start looking into Lumia and what they could build with it. Because Lumia has the Lumia chain, and then Lumia has Lumia Stream. Lumia Stream is kind of our main advantage over our competitors because it connects centralized exchange liquidity to decentralized applications. And that's available on Lumia L2 and a bunch of other EVM-based chains. And we want to keep expanding that.
Mm.
And one of the things, I don't know how much I can say about, so I'll just keep it a bit vague, but we have this new vision, right? So it's a bit like we want to create a wide range of L3s. The L3s can be ZK, OP, or Orbit stacks. It doesn't have to be ZK EVM stacks. The caveat is that they must all use Lumia token as the gas token. And effectively, if you are asset owner who wants some level of control or sovereignty over your chain, obviously we cannot do that on Lumia L2 because it's a network shared by token holders, and there is a governance on it. But if you want actual control over your network, then we will propose and start to push you down the L3 route so that you have full sovereignty, and you can just customize everything about that chain, from being it permission to permissionless, gasless to I don't know, Validium rollup or any other category that you wish to put out there. So the idea is that once we have this realm of L3 chains, they will attach themselves to Lumia L2, and now we have this collective RWA universe of liquidity that we can just play around with, thanks to Polygon AggLayer kind of sticking all this thing together as well.
Mm.
And now we have a full circle of tokenization and a realm where RWAs can flow in and out, generate yield, and they are still able to interact and integrate with like the likes of Arbitrum,
Mm.
Bloom, etc. So they're still interconnected with the rest of the ecosystem. So it's not just this universe that we created. That's kind of the vision that we have. That's what we're working on. As I said, there's a lot of MOUs and NDAs being signed at the moment.
Mm.
It's take time because RWA is not a space where you can just create hype out of thin air. It has to legally check out. Many people have to be happy about the announcement you make. So it takes time, but good things are happening behind the scenes.
So if I'm sitting on an asset of high value, how do I begin looking into tokenization of it? And do I reach out Lumia? Do I do something in particular? Like if I have, let's say, relatively high interest but relatively low tech skills, or like say like this.
Mhm. So the best way would be to reach out to us as an asset owner. We're pretty much on everywhere you could think of: LinkedIn, X, Telegram, etc. Reach out to us. We will immediately start a BD group with you, with the asset owner and the relevant team members, and we have to do some sort of a BD into your background, into the company's background, what the asset is, etc. And if it goes through this legal checklist that we have for every asset issuer that we want to onboard, then we'll start taking the next step of the process, which will be onboarding you to Lumia Hub, and then doing KYC/KYB, and then kind of going through the whole full phase of tokenizing from 0 to 1.
So basically, you're helping every step of the way. This is great. This is great. Awesome. Good. Quick fire of questions. What's the best thing in working with Polygon?
What's the best thing and what's the bad thing?
What's the best thing was working with Polygon? Polygon, AggLayer, CDK, all that.
Yeah. I mean, working with Polygon is great because they are like us. They want to push boundaries, and they understand that the Web3 space is actually quite small when you zoom out and look at things. And they're trying to build products that's going to cater to beyond that. Because of that alignment in vision and how we see things working, I find it quite easy to just go up to, I don't know, Sandeep or Justin, any of those guys to say, look, we're doing this. Can you have a look, help us out? What do you think? Give us some suggestions. And they're always around, you know. So I do like that one-to-one direct connection that you have with them. Whereas if you go to other chains and other big players, you may not get the same sort of love and attention that you hope to have.
Mm. Okay, this is a killing argument. What's the best thing is in working with Gateway?
What's the best thing of that? Well, there's many things. I do like working with Gateway because of many reasons, but some of the reasons is that technical competence is clear. It's there. You guys have good team members, good developers. You guys have good people that understand ZK tech and how to push its boundaries. Obviously, I'm going to speak from the engineering perspective because that's what I deal with day to day. But for business wise, you guys are very flexible. So you guys are willing to bend to a certain degree so that the whole space benefits, not just one or two players. And that's great. You know, we have to have more sort of partnerships and people willing to sort of move things around if we want the space to grow. Otherwise, let's be real, like this space that we have currently with you know, PvP kind of environment, whoever comes in last or whoever comes in first is the winner, is not sustainable. And we have to move beyond this. And that's the only way to move beyond this is start building products that cater to people outside, like institutions and retail players who want to actually get involved, but have less risk by getting involved.
Mm. Thanks. What's the best thing about Lumia for the world economy in the long run?
So Lumia, I think, will greatly benefit the world economy. Well, I think the entire Web3 sector and the RWA sector in general will greatly benefit the world economy because you basically open up liquidity and you make it borderless. Right? You allow liquidity to flow in and out wherever there is opportunity. There is never an idle piece of liquidity sitting somewhere. It should always be used. And this is why we have to kind of upgrade the current systems that we have. Like, for example, Wall Street, everybody hates Wall Street, but the reality is Wall Street was created to generate wealth, generate some returns. The only reason why people hated this is because it's closed, right? It's you can't just go up to Wall Street and say, I want to invest $100. That's not how it works. But with this new system, we take what Wall Street does well and then say, come and invest with $100, $50, $10, whatever it is that you're comfortable with. And that level of change is going to be huge across the globe because obviously now the small players start getting involved. And when you think about the number of small players that's in the space or in across the globe, as opposed to the very elite, you know, there's a lot more liquidity that can be tapped into, and a lot more opportunities that can be tapped into as well.
That's why we are very grateful to be with you on this journey.
Appreciate it. Likewise.
All for today, I think, for this installment at least, do you have any closing words?
Closing words, I would say I actually started reading The State Network from, oh, I forgot his name, the ex Coinbase CTO, Balaji, I think it was called. I would say if anyone's interested in how RWAs and crypto can change the world, take a look at that book. It's really, really eye-opening. But aside from that, I would say keep in touch with Lumia, track up what we do on X, and whenever you feel comfortable that you want to speak to us, just hit any one of us up as an asset owner or as a retail investor. And if you have any RWA ideas, whether they are dApps or onboarding them, we are open to suggestions. You know, we don't claim to have resolved everything. We are looking for creative ways, and we are open to hearing feedback, suggestions.
And we'll put all the links down below in the description of this video.
Appreciate it.
Thanks very much. Talk to you soon then.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.